Happy Lunar New Year! Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now today I'm going to be doing a mini Lunar New Year wrap up. Today's actually day 3 of the Lunar New Year and it's basically not done yet because it's still noon and I still have a lot of time to go before I finish up my other reads, and I do want to complete a few more books, but because I only have time right now to film, I decided to just film a little bit earlier, and then hopefully I can do the rest of the wrap up a few days later, or I could do the wrap up in my next wrap up video and talk about it. So basically I read a handful of novellas that featured an Asian character, or a handful of novellas that were by Asian authors that I really enjoyed, and I thought that you guys would be interested in learning more about and that you guys should read because they were actually really good. So the first book that I want to talk about is A Second Chance Road Trip for Christmas by Jackie Lau. Now Jackie Lau is an author that I have been talking a lot about recently in my YouTube videos because I find that she is a new to me author and I really do enjoy her stories, especially the Holiday with the Wong series. Like, it's just perfect, and after reading this book I want to pre-order her 4th book, which is like the Valentine's Day one featuring Amber Wong, which is like the little sister of like the 3 brothers that we've read so far. And I absolutely adored A Second Chance Road Trip for Christmas by Jackie Lau. It surprised me because the first one that I read that had to do with the Thanksgiving holiday, that one wasn't that hot on like in terms of like the heat flames. Like, there weren't that many hot scenes in it. It was mostly talking about their relationship and building their relationship, and also a lot of food and a lot of exploration in Toronto. So that's what I just figured like the whole entire series to be, like an entire series dedicated to food, which I am not complaining about because I love food and books. But this one included so many hot flames and I was just so shocked because it came from the older brother, who is Greg, and Greg is seen to be a man that listens to CBC Radio, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, like here in Canada, which is like a radio that only talks about like the news and important stuff and basically books and like, you know, a little bit drier things, which is different from a lot of the radio stations that talk about the latest celebrity gossip. So this is a character who always follows the rules, who always makes up backup plans, and who has like emergency kits in his car filled with 2 shovels, granola bars, water, sleeping tents, a heater. Like, he has all that parked in his car, and he just likes order, and he just doesn't seem like he's the type of guy that knows how to let loose and to really know how to kiss a girl, or rather as opposed to really just like, you know, have his way with a girl and be confident in himself. But he is, and that's like the kind of like the little secret that our main character Tasha is holding on to, because Tasha's friends are always like, why did you even like Greg back in high school? Because Greg just seems like he's like a nerd. But then Tasha's just like, oh well, like, you don't know. And like, really what we know is that Greg is basically a sex god, and Greg knows his way around the bedroom. And it was like so fun to read this side of Jackie Lau's books because I didn't know, like, you know, this is my 2nd book by her, so I didn't know that she was like into like writing like really hot sexual scenes, and I felt like that this book would be a perfect recommendation for readers who are really into fluff and who really want to read a holiday romance with second chance that pulls at your heartstrings and that has a lot of heat factors. And this novella is only like less than 100 pages and it was fairly enjoyable. It was an interracial relationship too as well, so it had so much diversity and it had a lot of food and it was just sweet and heartwarming, and I definitely recommend you to read this book. So the first book that I actually read for the Lunar New Year just so happened to be a middle grade novel called Minnie Kim and the Lunar New Year by Lila Lee. And now Lila Lee is actually like a debut author and she's doing really great for herself because she's actually publishing like 3 books this year. She already published 2 middle grade that released on the same day, and it was part of the Minnie Kim series. And then now she's also releasing another YA novel about a K-pop star, or about a K-pop trainee who happens to like make it to the final rounds of like a competition. Like, she's a bigger girl, and if you guys don't know, Korean beauty standards is that basically you have to be like a size 0 in order to be pretty, and there's a lot of like fat phobia, and like everybody's already cheering for it because like it's diversity at its finest. It's talking about K-pop, it's talking about a Korean girl, and I'll put the cover up here because I actually forgot the title of the book. So Lila Lee is definitely an author that we have to look out for in 2020. And I read Minnie Kim, which was the 2nd book in her Minnie Kim series, and I picked this one up because it fit perfectly with the theme of Lunar New Year, Year because it's about a little girl who's learning more about the Lunar New Year after living in America for all the years that she was born. You know, her Korean dad shows her like the Korean traditions and like the fun things that they eat and they do. And it was great to read about this. Like I learned a lot about the Korean culture. I learned a lot about the Lunar New Year. I learned a lot more about like family and friendships. And this book was something a lot deeper than I thought like it would be. Like it actually pulled at my emotional heartstrings a lot because Mindy Kim is actually coming from a broken family, or really just from a family where she doesn't have a mother anymore because her mother passed away because her mother was very sick. So I read book 2 and I never read book 1, but after reading book 2, I feel like her mother passed away fairly recently and they're learning to deal with their grief individually. So Mindy Kim is very like empathetic and she doesn't want to upset her father a lot of the times. So she always tends to like hide her like true emotions from her father. So for example, she has a nightmare where she lost her dad and then her dad is like, you know, waking her up and telling her that's okay. And then her dad was like, do you want to talk about it? And she's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. Because in her head, she's like, if I talk about it, it'll make my dad even more sad because my dad's already sad that mom's gone. And I'm like, wow, really? Like that really, like that triggered me. I finished this book in under an hour and it was just so good. And I almost started crying because there's so many heartfelt emotions. And I definitely do recommend you to pick up this book if you guys are interested in reading middle grade, because they just have a wide range of stories that are just very entertaining and very wholesome. So the third book, or like whatever the book that I read for the Lunar New Year, wasn't even a part of my TBR because it was just like a part of like the screenshots of books that I wanted to read for Lunar New Year, but I didn't feel like if I should read them or not because they seem kind of like a little sketch, if you guys know what I'm saying. But I'm glad I read this one. It's called Fated to Love You by Lisa Kwan, and this book is about a high school bullying romance. So basically our main character is the only Asian in her high school and people think of her differently because she looks different. Like a little thing happens on her first day of high school after transferring into this high school, and basically the head popular cheerleader girl, you know, stereotype bully, hates her for it because she thinks that our main character Kim is secretly like crushing on the girl's boyfriend, and then like the girl is like, I can't have this, like why are you like, you know, flirting with my boyfriend? And she's like very insecure, so she turns the whole school against Kim. And basically Kim deals with very racial like discrimination and bullying, so like every day she'll get like things scribbled onto her locker, her books will get knocked down, you know, racial slurs will be said to her. And I'm just like, oh my god, this is like intense, like this is an intense novella. And somehow she ends up saving the bully's boyfriend and she ends up in the hospital, you know, after getting hit by a car, and they develop their relationship. And the boyfriend's like, I had no idea my girlfriend was such a bitch, like why was I with her this whole entire time? And like they end up developing this friendship and then they obviously end up together. It was an interesting read. It was more intense than I thought it would be because it was like literally like 40 pages, but it was like filled with so much bullying and filled with so many high emotions that I was surprised. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was Heavy Equipment by Skye Warren, and Skye Warren is an author that I absolutely adore. She writes like dark romances that make you really feel like you're in the gritty, like grimy world that she puts you in. So this one, it stars a Chinese character, and I like this one because it started a Chinese character, which is like very hard to find, by the way. Like for this Lunar New Year readathon, like I struggled a lot to find like new reads that I never heard of. So it's very hard to find a Chinese character one. And she also spoke Cantonese. So I am Chinese and I also spoke Cantonese too, which was great. Obviously like Skye Warren didn't like do any of like the ping yum like of like how the words actually sound in Cantonese. She just would say like, you know, said in Cantonese. And then I was like, you know what? I'll take it. I'll take it. So basically this is about a girl who is part of this Lee family, which is like a very well-known family that builds a lot of properties, that builds a lot of shopping malls. And suddenly her father's business deal goes through, like it doesn't go through, and he lost a lot of money, and he specifically owes a lot of money to this person. And this person is like a blue-collar construction worker that made millions from his construction company. And he's like, you know what, you can repay your debt if you sell me your daughter and you give me your daughter's hand in marriage. And it's like kind of like a this kind of like paying your daddy's debt like trope, which was good in a way because it wasn't as dark as you would seem. Like our main character is actually secretly like infatuated and in love with her, and it was just him just trying to maneuver his way in so that he can have a chance with her. And he actually cared a lot about her emotions, and he made sure that he was always taking care of her. So I did find the romance kind of sweet, and overall I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I did read was a book that I deemed to be the worst 2020 book that I've ever read so far, because it's only January, and yeah, but this book actually like made me hate it so much, and I was like shook that I spent so long reading it. I think I spent like 2.5 hours reading this 300-page book, and it just made me mad because I thought it was going to be good. This was a new to be author, and yeah. So the book that I read was Piece of Work by Stacey Hart, and I saw Stacey Hart's, like I follow her on Instagram, and she did like this whole cover change revamp for her whole entire series, made it into like an illustrated cover, and I was like, oh my god, these are so beautiful, like I hope they're good. So that's why I read one of them, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. It's about a girl who's Korean American. I think she's actually mixed, like she's half Korean, half white. And then after like she got an exclusive internship from her New York university, and she was working at the Met, like the museum like in New York, and she's curating and she's researching with like these really famous like people who own the museum or like whatever. And she works beside this guy who is like very intimidating, and he only cares about himself, and he's dark, and he's hurt from his past because he was engaged to this girl, and he thought that he would love her forever, and he thought that they would get married and they'll live a happily ever after. But turns out she just wanted his name, and she just wanted the fame of his last name and the connections that he has, and she ended up cheating on him with his father, who is a lot older. So that got weird. But so he's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't do relationships. I can't promise anybody love because like I'm going to get hurt by it, and everybody just has a motive. So when our main character, Rin, bumps into him, and he gives no like, you know, like no interest in her whatsoever, because she's described as an ugly duckling. Like she doesn't wear makeup, she doesn't know how to style herself, she's 6 feet tall, so she wears like baggy clothes that like barely reach her ankles. Her sweaters are always having holes on them, she always has stains on them, and she basically looks like a mess, and she's like described as a mess. And then she goes through this whole transformation process where she makes herself beautiful, and she makes herself like a desirable, and she grows confidence in herself because she's sick of people like walking all over her like she's a doormat. And so she captures the attention of our main male character, and our main male character is like an asshole at best, because he always asks her like, you know, like, why did you do all this? You did all this to capture my attention. What's your motive? Because I'm attracted to you and I want you, but like, what's your motive? And then she's just like, what are you talking about? I'm doing this for myself. Like any woman is, really. Like she's literally just doing this for herself so she can gain self-esteem and confidence. But here we have this like fucking man just thinks that like it's all for him, and he's being cocky as F. And like they develop this relationship after like he realizes that he's an asshole and that he's treating her like shit, and Ren's like, okay, like fine, like I'll like, you know, I'll do stuff with you, but we got to keep it low key because like there's no such thing, like they don't allow any like relationships in the business, and if they do then she'll get fired, and obviously he'll be protected because he's the son of the owner. They do this secret relationship, and it's just like it's frustrating because he always tends to jump to conclusions, and he always makes irrational like decision making things that you would think no sane person would ever think to do, but he always thinks that it's like a good idea, and he brings it up to Rin like, you know, we should get married so we can protect you. And Rin's like, do you love me? And then he's like, no. And Rin's like, then why the fuck would you like recommend that like as an option? So I found this story like hilarious in a way, because I've never read a romance novel with our main hero being this dumb, like emotionally dumb. Like he's stunted. Like he thinks that he can't love anymore. He thinks that he can control his emotions and can control who he falls in love with. And he makes decisions that don't make any sense. Rin is only the sane person in this book, and she's clearly like, what is happening? Like, what? And you're just like, I never read a book where I begged the main character to not go with the guy in the end, because I was like, Rin, you're better off without him at this point because he's clearly dumb. So I gave this 1 out of 5 stars. I remember finishing this novel and I immediately went into the DMs of Lacey and Jessica because I was like, I'm so frustrated. What is this book that I just read? And now you can hear my frustration too. So the second last book that I do want to talk about is Capturing the Silken Thief by Jianni Lin. And Jianni Lin is a Harlequin author way back in the day. Like, she wrote so many, and she was literally the only diverse author that like wrote about Asian like romance, but she specialized in historical fiction in like China and like dynasty. So I thought like, this is new to me. I thought it would be interesting. And then I started reading it, and then I realized that maybe Chinese historical romances aren't my thing, because it's like a lot of like dynasties, and like sometimes the names are hard to like remember, and like I'm Asian, so I know that Chinese names are hard. And then like it gets kind of hard when you're like reading like 3 words for the name every time. It kind of just pulls you out of the story. But regardless, this one was about a girl who was like a thief, and she was like a bad girl, and he was like, what are you doing? And he's not even rich. Like, he's just like a normal person, like a scholar, and she was poor. And I was not interested in the story at all. I started reading it and I was like, I'm so bored. Like, I don't know what's happening anymore. And I gave it a 1 out of 5 stars. And I don't recommend you to read this novel. So the last book that I want to talk about for this readathon is Burn With Me by Roxy Geltz. And this one, honestly couldn't even tell you what this one was about either, because like I totally forgot. It was like 30 pages, and I think it was about North Korea and United States having tension. So North Korea sends missiles to United States, specifically where these 2 characters are, like in Hawaii, and they have to learn how to survive together by themselves on an island that's just been attacked by North Korea. And then I went, is this allowed? Like, is it like, I was like, is this allowed? Like, can we talk about stuff like this? Like, in romance? Like, this is intense. Like, I was like, ooh, okay. So I gave it 1 out of 5 stars because it wasn't interesting enough for me to keep going with it. And I just didn't care about the story. I didn't feel any attraction between the 2 characters, and was just like, okay, cutting it off. But anyways, that is it for all the books so far that I've read for the Lunar New Year readathon. I plan to read Jackie Lau's book, A Fake Girlfriend, for Chinese New Year very soon. Maybe I'll consider trying to finish Loathe at First Sight by Suzanne Park, which is a romance novel that I read way before the Lunar New Year readathon, but I just haven't had the chance to go finish it up yet. So I figured I'll finish it up this weekend, but also it's like half a book left, and I'm like, do I even have time? I don't even know. So anyways, if you do celebrate the Lunar New Year, happy Lunar New Year and happy Chinese New Year, and I'll see you guys again until next time. Bye.